Hello everyone to today's webinar, the LAGO 5.14 release webinar. I'll welcome everybody to today's webinar, as well as my colleagues Steve and Johnny from the United States. This time it's a little bit different. They are active participants. You should see them down at the screen in just a few seconds once this is connected. Hi, Johnny.
Good afternoon.
Steve is still connecting, it seems. Looks like Steve is in trouble connecting his devices. So, well, thank you everybody for joining. As I said today, it's the 5.14 release webinar. Oh, there's Steve. Hi, Steve.
Sorry, guys. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, works perfectly. Great to see you.
Good morning.
All right.
Or good afternoon.
You guys would like to say anything? How's the weather over there?
Currently raining in Chicago, but overall, can't complain.
Beautiful and sunny up here in Canada, so no complaints here.
No more snow? No more snow at your place, Steve?
No, that ended a couple of days ago. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
So for everybody from Europe who doesn't know where Steve is located, it's basically like 10 miles south of the North Pole. So whenever he sends me pictures from his front yard during winter, it's like meters and meters of snow. So we always like to make the joke whether the snow finally melted at his place.
Well, it finally has. Thank you.
All right, so let's get started with today's webinar. I'm going to start sharing my screen here. And today's topics will be two big topics. One is focusing on LAGO Proof enhancements. We did a lot of great new features in LAGO Proof. This will be the first part. And the second part will focus on enhancement that we did in our element layout mechanism, which allows you to create new objects using the element layouts that wasn't able to do before. So let's start with the LAGO Proof enhancements. Of course, I prepared some documents here. And I will log in with an example user that has access to LAGO Proof. And let's just navigate to LAGO Proof using our job palette. And you can see here, for example, I got 2 pages that are waiting to be looked at in LAGO Proof. And the first one at the moment looks like this. So typical page full with various offers. You might remember this one from our last webinar. We totally fell in love with this one. So I thought, well, let's use it again. Great variety of products here. And what I would like to show you first in LAGO Proof is a completely new concept of performing the check or the proofing of your documents. And especially in regards to the elements that are placed on your document. So you might remember that with LAGO 5.7, I think it was 5.7, we implemented the possibility to create element correction marks. Before that, it was only possible to have document-related correction marks, which was posing problems, especially when you placed a correction mark on the position of an element and that element was deleted or moved to a different position, then the correction mark originally wasn't moved with it because it was only bound to the document. With 5.7, we implemented element correction marks. So for example, if I were to create an element correction mark for the Inca Kola here, like add shadow, for example, and add this to the Inca Kola. And then you can see that here we have an element correction mark that is assigned to an element. So if the element Inca Kola is deleted from the page, the element correction mark is deleted as well. If we move it to a different page, the element correction mark is moved as well. Or if the element is moved to a different position on the same page, the element correction mark is moved as well. So the feature of element correction marks provided a great opportunity to really put correction marks specifically for elements to show that something needs to be done for an element. But up until today, there was always one question that couldn't really be answered in LAGO Proof, and that is the question, okay, for the Inca Kola, for example, I can see that someone has created a correction mark, which means, well, someone needs to be done here, which in result means that the Inca Kola element is not finished. Whereas for all the other elements on the page, maybe the big red cream soda or the gummy bears, we don't see any correction marks, which could basically mean two things. One, it's finished, nothing else needs to be done. Or second, no one really had a look at it. Usually, of course, in your workflows, it means that there is no correction mark, there's nothing that needs to be done for those elements. But there isn't really a direct way of telling the system, I as a product manager, I as a category manager, I as a buyer, I have looked at my element here, I had a look at my product, and it's okay. At the moment, it's completely indirect by looking at the element and seeing that there are no open element correction marks. So in order to support the question of really actively saying that something is done in LAGO Proof, we implemented a new feature or a new status on element that we call the element checked status. To support this, there are some various additional functionalities that are implemented here. And the first one is that you're now able to show element overlays. So let's click this new button. And what you can see here on this page is that there are different colored shades above my elements that represent different states of my elements. And at the moment, you can see yellow, green, and red. You can also see that for the elements that have a green overlay, there is a check mark icon. And you can also see that for the red one, there isn't one, as well as for the yellow overlay, there is also no check mark icon. And this check mark icon is the visual representation of the status that this element has been checked or marked as checked. To do that, you're now able to select elements directly in LAGO Proof, which you weren't before. So if I hide the element overlays for a minute, if you go to a LAGO Proof version prior to LAGO 5.14 and you click somewhere in the document, nothing really happens. The only thing that you do is that you select the proof document. But you can also see that here for the Inca Cola where I clicked previously, and if I click somewhere else, you can see that there is now a bounding box around your elements. And this bounding box is drawn by the placement of the components of the element. It goes from the top left corner of the top leftmost component to the bottom right corner of the bottom rightmost component which is placed for this element. So this is your, what we call element bounding box. So if you click somewhere, you have this element actively selected. This is also, of course, needed in order to be able to mark an element as checked. So if I show my overlays again and I click on the big red cream soda, for example, you might have noticed that there is a new button which says set element status checked. And it's as easy as that. You just select the element, you click as checked, and that's it. You can also uncheck it in case there's something that needs to be done now or you misclicked. So it's basically a toggle button, which will also show you like set elements status checked. If you have an element selected that is checked, it will tell you that this will now set the status to unchecked. So this is how you actively set an element to be checked in LAGO Proof. And to help you to easily identify which elements still need to be checked, we have the colored overlays here in LAGO Proof. Now there are three different states an element can have in regards to this. The first one is an element is checked, which in this case means it has a check mark icon and a green overlay. Or an element has at least one unresolved correction mark, and that means element correction mark. If there is a document correction mark on top of that, this is not taken into account because we only take a look at element correction marks. So in this case, the Inca Cola, I just created an element correction mark. This one is now red because there's one open element correction mark. Yellow means it doesn't have any open correction mark, but it's also not checked. You cannot check an element that is red. If I click on Inca Cola and hit the check mark icon, it'll tell me that the element still has at least one open correction mark. So you cannot check an element or mark an element as checked that has open correction marks. That can only be done for elements that has no element correction marks or all element correction marks of that element are already resolved. So this is how you check an element. Now, the overlays, of course, at the moment for me are yellow, green, and red. But if your circular or catalog page has a lot of green, red, and yellow, these might not be the colors of your choice. So this is same goes for the checkmark icon. So if you have lots of green on your page, the checkmark icon in green might not be the best color to be spotted on the page. You might want to have it in black or in yellow, I don't know. So this is why we added the opportunity to have those configurable. In the central configuration, in the section proof, there are additional settings now where you can define the color for all of those 3 states. So for example, element overlay color for no open correction marks for elements which are checked, or for one that has open correction marks. So here are the values that I typed in. You can also configure the transparency, and you can configure the color of the checkmark icon. So this can be configured to your personal taste. Of course, not to the personal taste of the end user, because this is in the central configuration. It's the same for all the users, but this is where this can be configured. In addition to these possibilities to mark an element as checked, we also enhance the document check runs in LAGO Explorer. I'm not 100% sure whether all of you know the ability of document check runs in Explorer, so let's have a quick look at that. Let's go back to LAGO Explorer. Here's my project, and here are the documents in my project, and there is a traffic light icon here in the document list of LAGO Explorer that opens the view to perform checking reports. If you click that, there is an additional view where you can perform the document checking reports, and those can be configured, and then there is a list of predefined and or available checks that you can perform on document level. For example, there are things that where you can check whether a document has local components. That might be something for customers that work with compression, where a local component might break the compression because someone accidentally created one. That might be something which is worthwhile checking. Or there are variants of the document which are empty, which means there's no element or component on that page. Or there is a variant of the page where there is a rester field which is empty, or multiple elements are assigned, so something that needs to be resolved. And these can be done all together if you want to. The 2 new document check runs we have here are unchecked elements and elements with open correction marks. So I have those selected, and then you can click one or multiple documents here and just run the checking report by clicking the traffic light symbol again. And here you can see, for example, that it'll tell me for the page 2 to 3, all of these elements, they are unchecked, which means they have not been marked as checked. And there is one element, the Inca Cola, which contains open correction marks. So let's go back to LAGO Proof, and you see that I've just checked some of those elements to be, or I marked those elements to be checked. So let's do this for a few more of those. Save this and run the checking report again, and you can see that now the list has been shortened to the elements that are still unchecked. So this is something that at the moment is only available in Explorer, this view. Of course, this is on our general roadmap to port features from Explorer to the web applications as well. But if you're doing document checking reports in Explorer, you can now also utilize the ones to verify whether there are unchecked elements on the page or elements that have open correction marks. So much for the possibility to mark elements as checked. You also see the status of an element, whether it's checked or not, in the element list of LAGO Layout and InDesign. You also have the possibility to reset or set the checked status in InDesign. This overlay feature of showing something in yellow, green, or red, however, is at the moment only available in LAGO Proof. All right, so much for the possibility to mark elements as checked in LAGO Proof. But there are more things that we've done here in LAGO Proof. The first one is that you might run into situations where you have multiple elements on the page, and I don't know, maybe here you would like to tell the designers in InDesign that they need to add shadows for all the images. And if you have this issue with multiple elements on the page, you need to create multiple element correction marks. Of course, sometimes customers use a way of just creating a document, one single document correction saying, please add shadows to all elements. That works as well, but you might have scenarios where you want to create the same correction mark for multiple elements. Or because the same thing needs to be done, for example, please enlarge image, or I don't know, move position, place second image, or whatever it is. This can now be done in various ways. So the first one is when you create an element correction mark, for example, one for the Garrett popcorn on top of here. Please do something. Thank you. We'll now have the ability to go to this dialog where you see the list of all elements of the eProof that you're currently looking at. And you can now select multiple elements here. So let's say I want to create this correction mark for the popcorn, the gummy bears, and the riblets. So I'll select 3 of those elements. I say OK. And now you can see that the element correction mark has been created for all 3 of those elements with the same settings. Of course, since the size of elements might be different, the size of elements where you place the correction marks might be different, the position of the correction mark for the additional elements will be on the top left corner of the element. Okay, before I resume with this topic, let's have a look at whether there are some questions. There's a question whether it's possible to create an InDesign export job in case the element documents are in all status. Let me rephrase this. So the possibility to automatically export InDesign documents in case all elements are marked as checked. So at the moment, this is not possible, but there is an additional feature that I will show in a few that allows you to automatically move pages forward in case there are no open correction marks. And the second question was whether there is a lock that prevents that a document is moved to the next status in case not elements are marked as checked. No, unfortunately not, but that's a pretty good idea that we could implement as well, that currently you are still able to move the pages forward in your workflow even though there are unchecked elements. Next question, whether we are able to create a correction. The question is whether this creation of correction mark works for all the correction tools. Yes, it does. The only exception are the correction tools which are text correction and strike corrections, because those are always bound to the text that you've highlighted or crossed out. You cannot transfer these automatically to other elements, but all the other tools, maybe the simple correction marks or the pen correction mark, arrow, ellipse, or rectangle, all of those can be created at the same time. All right, so I was just creating correction marks at the same time while creating it. So let's remove those duplicates and do it in a different way, because there might also be a scenario where you might have one correction mark already, it exists, and you don't want to create correction marks for multiple elements while creating it. You want to copy an existing element correction mark. So let's pick this element correction mark here from the Garrett popcorn. I want to be copied. And let's pick this one. And you might have noticed that next to the Save button, there is now a Copy button, which allows you to copy an element correction mark, which is only enabled once you have an element correction mark selected. And I'll basically do the same that I did before. I now copy this element correction mark to the gummy bears and the riblets. Like this, you have a list of elements. You see all the element columns in here, complete list, of course, which you can, where you can change the column order if you want to move the fields which are important for you to the front. And then if you click yes, that element correction mark will be moved or will be copied to the other elements. And I think I've just lost my network connection here. There it is. And now I have the element correction mark copied to my other 2 elements as well. And if I double click on that one, you can see that the data that is copied will be transferred over from the original correction mark. There's one thing which is not being transferred. In case you are copying a correction mark that is already resolved, the copy of the correction mark will always be open. So copied correction mark will always be treated as new correction marks, because I copy a correction mark that is already resolved. In case you do that, the new correction mark will always be treated like a new one. Another thing that might come in handy is that you want to move correction marks to different elements. So you might have placed something here and just see, oh, well, this correction mark doesn't really make sense for this element. Actually, it belongs to another element. This can be done by changing the element assignment here in this dialog, of course, but we also now added a little shortcut here that you simply move an element correction mark onto a different element. In this case, I'm going to move the one from the riblets to the ice cream. And it'll tell me that the correction mark is currently assigned to the riblets and whether it should be assigned to the ice cream instead. If I say yes, you will see that the correction mark is simply moved there, but the element assignment is changed. If I say no, the element correction mark is moved nonetheless, but the assignment will stay with the original element. So this is a quick way of reassigning element correction marks from element to element just by dragging and dropping it and saying, yes, I want to reassign that element correction mark. We have another question. The question is for the copied correction mark, whether you're able to change them after the copying. Of course, if you copy the correction mark, it's treated like a new correction mark, and afterwards you can change anything because there is no connection to the original correction mark anymore. It's treated like a completely new correction mark. All right, that was reassigning element correction marks. Another thing that we finally did, and I think many customers have asked this for a while, is the possibility to display the element or to display the correction mark details in the document and not only in the bridge. For example, you might have hidden the bridge because you need all the space of your screen to see the document. You have now the possibility to show the details of a correction mark by clicking on it. Let me zoom in a little bit. Like this. So you click a correction mark and you will see the details directly in the document. So if you ever worked with Acrobat before, probably most of you did, you know that they basically do the same. You click something on the document and you see the details right here. So this is another way of getting rid of or more using the complete view here of your screen and show the details directly in the document. Again, here you can see that the size of the text and the background and the color of the text, at the moment it's black on green, but if you prefer a different color, this can also be configured. In the central configuration, there's some additional settings here where you see the correction detail background color in the web proof section, the font color, the font size, the height of the sticker, and the maximum width. And these are the settings that you can enter in the central configuration to change the color to whatever you prefer for the details within the document. Last but not least, we implemented another nice little shortcut in LAGO Proof, which allows you to move pages forward and backward in the workflow. Previously, whenever a user in LAGO Proof was done with the work and had to move the pages to the next step, they had to, for example, close the document. Well, they are automatically sent back to the job list. And then in order to advance the workflow, they had to set the job to done. But the use case where the page needed to be moved back to a previous status was more complicated because you had to go to the document list of LAGO PIM or Explorer, pick the document and change the workflow status to one of the previous ones. We implemented the possibility to change the document status in the document list of LAGO Proof in LAGO 5.12, if I remember correctly. But still, you had to navigate into the project to change the status to a previous one. And if you were initially coming from the job list and you were closing the document here, you're always jumping back to the job list, and you had to pick the project in here, open the project, go to the document list, pick the document, show the bridge, and then go to the workflow section, which at the moment I don't even have enabled. And in the workflow section, if you have the user right, you were able to change the status to one of the previous ones. This has now been enhanced with a little shortcut. So let's go back to my proofing document in the proofing view. And you might have seen already that there is a forward and backward button now. And the forward button allows you to advance the document status in all variants. So if you click that, it will move the page forward in all variants, even if you only look in one of those. And The back button allows you to move the page back to a previous workflow status. The difference is that the forward button is only able to move the page to the next status, but the back button allows you to jump to one of the previous statuses. So if you want to move the pages back to product planning or grid planning, you can do this right here, and then all the variants of the document are moved back to the first status. Of course, in order to move a page backward, you need the workflow privileged user right. If not, this button will not become active for the user. And the list of available workflow statuses, of course, depends on the workflow status of your current document. So at the moment, my page is in status 4. And so I can only move back to 1, 2, 3. And if I click to move forward, that page will be moved forward to the next status. So let's do the following. I'll go back to my job list and open the second document. So there's the second one, page 4 to 5, different products. And let's move page 2 to 3 to the next status just by clicking the button. It will show you which status this page is moved to. Let's start with this one. It will also show you which page which status this page is being moved to. So this will be moved to page approval. And let's remove that from the view. And for this one, I will also move this forward. No, that's not the incorrect status. Close this document for a second. Okay. I think someone is messing with the database. And I think I pressed these buttons too often. So I quickly have to see whether someone in the background is playing with my data, and it seems so that someone is playing some tricks on me and was moving my pages forward right during my webinar. So let's move my pages back to my workflow status, which is first proof. And let's do that again. Refresh. Here we go. So again, page 2 to 3. I'm going to use the button to move it forward. It'll tell me that it will move the page forward to the workflow step, implement corrections. Yes. Close this one. And let's take a look at the other page. And there's something which is different. If I move this forward, it will tell me it will be moved to page approval. So it will not be moved to status 5. It will be moved to status 6. Why is that? And let's take a look at the users in InDesign, which are in the next workflow status. And if I refresh my job list here, you can see that only working page 2 to 3 is popping up in InDesign. Working page 4 to 5 actually is not popping up in InDesign, because if I log out with my user PM here and go to the user marketing, which is the one which is responsible to perform page approval, you will see that the working pages are now popping up for this user to perform the page approval, but only the working page 4 to 5, not the 1, 2 to 3. There we go. So my page 4 to 5 was skipping a workflow status automatically. This is due to an additional feature that we implemented in the workflow. And if I go to my workflow configuration, which is over here, you can see this is my example workflow, grid planning, from grid planning to done. My pages were in the status first proof. I advanced the workflow status to the next one, implement corrections. But in the workflow status implement corrections, I checked the new workflow status action, which is called automatic advancing if no open correction marks exist. So there's a new setting in workflow, which you can configure on status level, that in case your document does not have any open correction marks, and that includes element correction marks plus document correction marks, the page will automatically be moved to the next workflow step. It doesn't mean that this workflow step is skipped. It means that it's automatically advanced. It means if you have automate jobs configured to this workflow step, which are triggered upon leaving the workflow status, these jobs are automatically triggered because we do not skip it. The workflow moves the page from 4, in this case, to the next workflow step 5. When entering the status, it will check whether this is set, which is in this case. Then it will verify whether there are open correction marks. If there aren't any open correction marks, it will automatically advance the document status to the next one, but it will trigger all the actions which are assigned to this workflow step. So for a split second, there will be the page in this step, but it will be automatically moved to the next status. So this is why one of the pages is automatically moved to page approval. So if you have a workflow configured where you have multiple correction cycles, multiple correction steps, and you might run into situations where just 50% of your pages already finished because there are no open correction marks. You can configure that in your workflow, and the pages are automatically advanced to the next one. All right, so much for all the new features in LAGO Proof. And let's see if we have any additional questions in the list. Yeah, there is one question. That is when you copy the element correction marks, whether the settings for global and local are copied as well. Yes, they are. So basically everything you see on the correction mark is copied, except for this that is resolved. So if the correction mark is already resolved, it will be treated as a new one. Anything else? Yes, since you've seen these new features in LAGO Proof, and let me quickly open one of the documents. And you see all these new buttons, and you have these element overlay and the possibility to mark elements as checked. It might be something that you want to use in the future, but maybe not right away. And then there's the question whether you're able to hide these new buttons using workspace configurations. Yes, of course. So in case you don't want to give your users access to the possibility of marking elements as checked, you can simply hide all these new buttons from your workspace, and then the users work in LAGO Proof as before. All right, so let's, if you have any additional questions, feel free to type them. We still got some time left. In the meanwhile, I'll jump over to the next part of the webinar, which are the element layout enhancements. So in InDesign, I have two additional pages, page 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, for which I have different elements assigned to. And for those, I want to show some new functionalities that we implemented in the element layout. Now let's start with page 6 and 7. I only have 1 or 2 elements assigned to those pages to just show the element layout features. And on this page, I have an element which I call the Coca-Cola Super Sale. And this element is a challenge because you can see that this element contains a lot of different articles or SKUs assigned to it. And if we take a look at the articles list, you can see that there are actually 16 different articles assigned to it. And these 16 different articles are not just different tastes, so it's not just Coke, Coke Zero, Fanta Sprite, or whatever else. It's actually all of those in different package sizes. So for me, this is an artificial promotion where I have everything that I have from Coca-Cola is a super deal today, but I want to display it in one element, and I assigned different articles to it. So you can see that I have the Coca-Cola 330 milliliter can. I got this for Sprite, Zero, and Fanta as well. I have the pack of multiple cans. I got the 1 liter bottle, and I got the crate of 1 liter bottles. And of course, all of these different articles have different pricing. So you can see that the can, for example, it's just 59 cents, whereas the pack is $1.99, the bottle is, I don't know, 79 cents, and the crate is $8.99. So it's different pricing within the same element. So of course, what I could do here is I could build a table, like if I was selling, I don't know, copy paper, for example. But I don't want to build a table in a grocery circular. I just want to display my offer, and I want to display multiple price tags. Now let's do the following. Previously, if I was applying an element layout, and in this case, I'll just apply one standard element layout I have here. Let's pick this one. It might look like this. So my element layout is configured to just place one image and one text frame and a price tag. What you can see here, of course, is that due to our automatic detection of flash articles, the price tag will contain the data from the cheapest article, or the article with the cheapest or the lowest price. In this case, I have multiple prices or multiple articles which have 59 cents. So my automatic flash article detection, in case I haven't set a flash article manually, will pick one of those articles. And in this case, if there are multiple articles, it's random which one's picked. So it picked the one from, no, I think it's not random, it's the one with the lowest order. So it picked the data from the Fanta, but it placed the picture from the Coke Zero. So it doesn't really add up here. And it's not displaying what I would like to display because there are actually multiple prices. Of course, previously what you were always able to do is to drag and drop your additional price tags that you have here from your component templates by saying use the current article selection for placeholders, pick one of the articles and place that. But of course, in this case, the graphic designer needs to know or identify how many different prices do I have? How many different articles do I have? How many price tags do I need? And this can become quite cumbersome, especially when there are changes to the data and suddenly you need more or less. So let's do the following. I'll just delete all of those components and apply a different element layout. And this element layout is called multi-offer. It's a little bigger. It's half a page. And if I place this one, you will see that now multiple images are placed. This is just a configuration of the element layout that was available previously as well. But now I have 4 different price tags placed. And what you can also see on the different price tags is that there's actually 1 price tag placed per package or package type. So I have 4 articles, which are the can, 4 articles, which is the pack of the can, 4, which is the bottle, and 4, which is the crate, which means I would like to have 4 different price tags here. And the question, how many different price tag, how many different components need to be created, is answered by configuring what attribute is making an article distinct or not. So let's take a look at the element layout configuration of this specific element layout. So there's my circular element layout, template document. And in here, I have my element layout multi-offer. And in this element layout, you can see that for my category price label, I have a new checkbox, which is called create component for each distinct article. Previously, you only had the possibility to say create component for each article. So you either had the possibility to do it like this, which was only ever creating 1 component. Doesn't matter if you had 1 or 1,000,000 different articles, it was always just 1 component. The option to create 1 component for each article can become quite handy if you just have 2 articles. But if you have 16, like my example element here, this feature would have created 16 components from which 4 always had the same values. So we implemented a feature to say, I want to have the possibility to create a component for each distinct article. But since the configuration, what makes an article distinct is not something that you would configure in the central configuration, for example, because it might be different from, I don't know, fruits or vegetables to drinks or dairy products, the possibility to configure that is in the element layout itself. So whenever you check the check mark to create a component for each distinct article, there's a new tab that becomes active, which is called distinct. And in this tab, you can pick between price and price fields plus price properties. I don't have any price properties configured, article properties and article fields. Of course, you don't have access to element fields or project fields or variant fields because those cannot make articles distinct. It can only be information that is on article or below article levels. So this is why we have article property and price level here. And you can select 1 or multiple fields. So for example, if you say it's not only the package that makes my articles distinct, which in my case is article field 5, but also the price, then I configure 2 of those fields to be distinct, which would mean every article which has different values in at least one of those fields will create a new component upon applying an element layout. So pretty powerful feature if you're dealing with multiple articles which are assigned to 1 element. The best part about this is that if we go back to our page, at the moment, let's save this one. If you're working with placement rules and your workflow is configured to apply placement rules upon opening documents, this is also evaluated when the document is opened. So let's do some data manipulation here and remove all the articles which are a bottom. So I will go back to our Explorer. Just do some data manipulation. Might be an import that is deleting articles. I'll just do this manually. I'll go to my Coca-Cola Super Sale. There are my assigned articles, and I pick all 4 articles which represent the bottle. And I'll delete the article assignments. And then I just reopen my document in InDesign. And you can see that one of the components removed. Now this is a feature where another feature which we implemented some years ago comes in quite handy, which are our annotations, where we have the possibility to show unplaced components. So the dotted frame tells me something was removed, which was previously on the page. Also, something which comes in handy is to say new components, because if I were to add some additional articles to my element, which would make up new distinct articles, this will create additional components on opening of the document. So let's do that. I'll save this. And then I will just re-add the 4 articles that I just removed. And then we have a look at the page and see what's happening then. Explorer. Pick my articles, bottle, and assign those back to my, where is it? Coca-Cola Super Sale. And all variants. And then let's reopen the document in InDesign. And we will indirectly see that there is a new component to be placed. You see the star icon, which means there is a new component. This is one of the drawbacks of the features, that this feature, since it doesn't really reapply the element layout, cannot recalculate the correct position, because it might be that the graphic designer has moved all of those price tags to a different position. That means in case this distinct mechanism identifies new components that need to be placed, they will always be placed at the origin of the category of the element layout. So if I move this one to the side, you can see that there is my new component which is placed. So if you use this feature, I definitely recommend you to always have these check marks active, so that the users in InDesign see that new components are automatically placed on the page, or components are automatically unplaced from the page. All right, so much for the possibility of being able to define distinct articles within the element layout. Next is another element layout feature. And for that, I have another document, which is page 89. And currently, I don't have any elements on that page. Well, not components on that page, but I have 2 elements assigned, some Apple AirPods and PS4 wireless DualShock controller. And what I will do is I will apply the same element layout to both elements, which in this case is my standard offer hero element layout. Let's do this for the Apple AirPods first. Looks pretty basic: text frame, image, price tag. And let's do the same for the controller here. Pretty basic as well, but something is different. So let's take a look at the controller here. And you can see that for my DualShock controller, there is a component created that we call an image with a text caption. So you can see that there is a detail image. It's the back side of the controller, which shows the mini USB connector with a text that is related to that image. So you might have a product, and you might have detailed shots of that product, and you might have some copy that are kind of related to the product, but actually related to the image of the product, because they explain what you see on the image. So it's a detailed shot. That is something that is heavily being used when you look in circulars and there's, I don't know, there's a chainsaw and there's something explained, which means like, I don't know, this is a high quality blade made of titanium or something. And you would show this in a detailed shot on the page as an additional USB, not just with the text, with the copy text, but also with the corresponding image to it. Now, if we take a look at the element itself, we can see that for my Sony controller here, I have 2 images assigned. I have the same for the AirPods, but here only one image is placed, because if we take a look at these two images on my light table, we can see that both of these images are of the asset type product images. If I pick the images from my controller and put those on the light table, you can see that one is of asset type product images and one is of asset type detail image. Now, you don't need to use different asset types for that. You could also use an asset attribute or user field to distinguish between real product shots and detail shots. But you need to have, at least on the level of the asset type or on the asset level itself, an attribute or some identifier where the element layout knows that this is a product image or this is a detail image. What you can also see when I click on my product image here, that at the bottom where you can show and hide asset properties, you see that there is no property for this one, but for the detail image, there's a property name called caption with the value mini USB connector. And this is where the value is pulled from. So the placeholder we have here in this frame, it's not an article field, not a price field, not an element field. It's nothing on article, element, price, property level. If I go to my placeholder palette and say show placeholder, you will see that this is an asset property placeholder. So this is a placeholder of an image. This is what you need in order to have these automatically populated. Now let's take a look at the element layout, and then I will show you what else needs to be configured in order to achieve that. First of all, in my template document, I need a component template. And here's my component template, image with caption, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's just some group frames. There's a background frame. There's an empty image frame. That is important. Your component template needs to have at least one empty image frame. A text frame, which contains the placeholder. So if I go back to my placeholder palette, you can see this is my asset property placeholder from the type caption. And then you can just build it as complex as you want to. Now, when you create the component template, or when you read out this object from your template document to create a component template, all of you know that this cannot be an asset template. This is a layout object. Everything which has more than one frame is always a layout object in LAGO. So you can also see that this is a layout object. It has a category, image with caption. So in LAGO admin, which is over here, still here, in your product and projects area under categories, you will find that I have a category called image with caption, which is not asset, but layout object. Because if I create this as asset, I could not assign this category to my component template because the component template is a layout object. So you need to configure this here. So of course you need the component template. Next, if you put this into your element layout, which I have over here, so let's take a look at my element layout. There's my element layout, and you can see there's my image with text caption. We did a change here in the element layout dialog, which is something that is a little bit hidden because you don't really see this. This is not a checkbox. But what is now possible is that when you select a category, and you see that depending on the category that you select and the type of the category, different checkboxes become active. So for example, I have my category description, which is, if we take a look back into LAGO admin, of the component type text. And for text component templates, you cannot use the feature to create and arrange for matching assets, which is pulling assets from the asset assignments, of course, because this is just a text frame. For image categories, of course, this is available as well. If I click the description again, you see rules, but not asset rules. For main asset image, which is an asset category, you see asset rules. Previously, for layout objects, you were not able to select asset rules, nor you were able to select this checkbox to pull images from assignments. This is now possible for layout objects. But in order to not do some misconfiguration here in your element layout, we check whether the component template really contains an empty image frame. because we can only place images into this object if we have an empty image frame. So for example, if I pick my price label category, which is also a layout object, and I say arrange matching components and click this checkbox, it'll tell me that the asset relating settings are not possible because the component template of the category does not contain an empty image frame. So your component template needs to have at least one empty image frame in order to use this feature. If not, we will prohibit the setting here because then you would end up with incorrect layout. What you can do in your component template is your component template, it can have empty image frames, but it can also have filled image frames. So you might want to build something where the background is an image frame which contains a background image, which is already in the LAGO database, and every component should reuse this as a background. We allow to embed LAGO images into layout object component templates. So you can have filled image frames and empty image frames in your component template. When this component is placed by the element layout, we will only place images into the empty image frames. The image frames which are filled with an image already will not be touched, of course. So this is why we check whether the component template has at least one empty image frame. This is what you configure in element layout, and that's basically it. Now, there are some things that you need to keep in mind when working with the asset properties. Since asset properties are quite new, let me go back to my working page here. You're not able to maintain asset properties everywhere in LAGO where you have access to assets. So at the moment, you can only see the asset attributes. Actually, you can only see them here in the asset light table of LAGO layout. You cannot see them in Explorer and Pict, and you cannot see them in LAGO DEM yet. That still needs to be implemented. And setting up the asset property type, so setting up the field for it, currently is also not possible in LAGO admin. That is still being developed. So when you want to set this up, please reach out to us and we will help you with setting up the property type on asset type level. At the moment, we need to do this in the database. So if you want to do this in LAGO, if you want to use this feature in LAGO 5.14, you will need some help from us. And finally, the maintaining of the values of the properties at the moment is only possible using the XML ticket import for assets and the API. So we still need to fill in some gaps here to be able to maintain these properties right here. So at the moment, I can only see them. In order to change them, I need to use XML ticket import or our asset API. And then if you have that, you can create those components using element layouts as well. What you can also do to pick this, if you have multiple images assigned to your element, for example, is that, let's say you have two images of the same asset type, you can create a property where you have, which is filled with an asset caption, and then you use asset rules to determine which assets do have a caption and which don't have a caption. And the ones which do have a caption, those will be picked and placed as text with caption using this component template, and everything else is being used in a normal image component template. All right, a little bit technical, pretty sophisticated new features on element layout level. But you can see even after 20 years in element layout, we still try to move the boundaries to allow you to use more automation in LAGO. And we've had these questions being asked all the time, whether it's possible to create these kind of components using the element layouts, and now we finally have those. So I'll happily invite you to use these features starting from LAGO 5.14. And let's see whether we have any additional questions in regards. No, not at the moment. So I'll leave the chat open for a few more minutes and see whether we have any additional questions.
Yeah, we got a question on this side, Paul.
Okay.
The question is, so sorry if this was mentioned, but can asset rules be used in conjunction with the feature that you just showed with the assets with text captions?
Yes, you can. If I go back to my element layout dialog, you will see that if I select my image with caption here, the asset rule tab becomes active. I don't have any asset rules configured at the moment, but this would allow you, for example, to look into all assigned assets and filter only those that have a text caption and place only those in the image with caption component template, for example.
And the next question is, this is a good one, can we use both asset placement rules and regular placement rules within the same element layout configuration?
Yes, you can. I have to be honest, I don't know whether it's possible where you can configure it to use it for the same category, but you can configure rules plus asset rules. And it should work that you configure a rule that defines whether this category should be placed at all. And if that rule is true and the category should be placed, on top of that, we will evaluate the asset rules to determine which assets should be placed into that category. So that might be the ultimate element layout combination that we have there. But I think I will see some customers pushing these boundaries in the near future. All right. I think that's it with the questions for today. In case something pops up after the webinar, feel free to reach out to Steve, Johnny, or myself. Send us an email, call us. We're always there for you to explain the features in greater detail. If you want to set those up and you have additional questions, feel free to
Paul,
again.
One final question just popped in here. Okay. It's not related to the new features, but it did come up as when will LAGO support Windows 11?
Windows 11. Okay, now I'm really in trouble because you see I'm working on a Mac. I haven't used Windows in a while, but I don't know for sure, but usually, and it has always been the same during the last releases of Windows, it was always supported from the beginning once the operation system was available, or let's rephrase it in a way that LAGO was always running on those operating systems, at least the newer LAGO versions. I think LAGO 3 will no longer run on Windows 11. And we usually didn't have any problems, but we will always do a test during our regression test prior to the release. And I don't think we will have any problem with supporting Windows 11 for LAGO 5.14 and the other versions. But in case anything pops up, of course, you will see this updated in our system requirements page on the customer side on our website.
And it does look like the official release date of Windows 11 is October 20th. So probably as a guesstimate, definitely by the end of the year.
Oh yeah, I would assume so. Yeah, and the official release of LAGO 5.14 is tomorrow. So you have to wait one more day until you can get your hands on it. Feel free to try out the new features. As I said, if you have any questions, reach out to us. Thank you for participating today, and see you for the next release webinar in 12 weeks. Bye, everybody.
Bye, all. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.